Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. In lecture 54, we will talk about education. So, the different concepts that we will cover are education in ULBs, your DPFI guidelines on educational facilities. Then we will do a case study on Newtown, Kolkata. We will then talk about the Sarva Shiksha Abhijan and some other government programs. And finally, we will talk about the National Educational Policy. So, as we have learnt earlier, SDG 4 is about providing quality education, the sustainable development. So, this is one of the most important sustainable development goals, because education is the basis for jobs, getting acquiring skills, and which is again linked to poverty eradication. It's linked to economic development and so on. So, SDG 4 has several targets. The first one is to provide free primary and secondary education. Then equal access to quality pre-primary education. So, basically we are dividing education into primary, secondary and pre-primary. Then affordable technical, vocational and higher education. So, we have to provide both technical, vocational and higher education at affordable prices, as well as it has to be made available. People have to given access to this kind of education. All groups, all population groups should get access. Increased number of people with relevant skills for financial success. Elimination of all discrimination. Universal literacy and numeracy. So, it's not only just we have to make sure that people who have been left out, they should also be made literate, as well as they should be also given basic knowledge of numeracy as well. Education for sustainable development and overall global citizenship. So, these are some of the basic targets, and some of the process targets are build and upgrade inclusive and safe schools, expand higher education scholarships for developing countries, and making sure supply of qualified teachers in developing countries. So, more or less you see that education is something which is basic and it has to be provided to everybody, and people should have opportunity to avail education at any point of time, and also education should be skill oriented or job oriented, so that at the end of the day people should have a job or they could be gainfully employed after getting an education. So, at ULB level, to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and to promote lifelong learning opportunities for all, there has to be several tasks that has to be undertaken. Particularly, these are linked with several government programs, several government policies as well. But in general, we can say in terms of data and monitoring that has to be undertaken in ULBs, we have to not only education but also safe and reliable transportation for children to schools and other facilities, access to scholarships, uniforms, textbooks and midday meals. So, that means everybody should be getting this, of maybe from poor background as well as from rich background. Access for special needs children to schools. So, there are special needs children who also have to be taken to schools. For them, special schools may have to be set up. There has to be girls' toilet in school, because that's one of the primary causes while girls drop out from schools. Menstrual hygiene management infrastructure in schools. So, because of girl children, we have to create this kind of facilities. Then evening and mobile schools, learning centers and residential camps to provide bridge courses for dropouts and out of school children. So, many people have dropped out, or even senior people who are working, they also need to upgrade some skills and all. So, all this could be again carried out through evening schools as well as mobile schools. Then to also create teachers, good teachers. So first job is to fill the vacant teachers post, and implementation of gender champions policy in schools and colleges. This is also part where boys or men are trained to uphold the the importance of the women gender, or to make sure that the right of those the other gender. So they are the gender champions. So creation of that. Overall goal is to provide this quality education, the overall quality of education that has to be tracked. Then instances of discrimination against girl students, students belonging to SC/STs and religious minorities, and students with disabilities, this has to be tracked and monitored. Then school dropout and irregular attendance rate, as well as reasons why they are dropping out, what is the rate of that dropout, both for irregular attendance and eventual school dropout. Both has to be tracked for both girls, boys, and students with disabilities. So this will help us to understand how we can prevent these dropouts if I know the reasons for them. And similarly, discrimination and all has to be reduced. So these are the different things that we have to monitor and track at the urban level. So what kind of actions and awareness programs that we can conduct? Actions could be, we could do preschool and Anganwadi welfare committees to determine how these are being operated. Libraries to support literacy program. Vocational training and tertiary education for skills development. So some of this we have discussed earlier in our previous lecture. Then awareness of rights of children under Right to Education Act. Environment for 100% enrollment and retention of students in schools. So we have to create infrastructure or the overall learning environment so that people want to go to school as well as they stay in schools. Eliminating gender disparities in education. Then Educational Standing Committee to oversee operationalization of RTE's Act. Then Comprehensive Participatory Education Plan to improve basic school facilities that are child, disability and gender sensitive and provide safe, non-violent, inclusive and effective learning environment for all. So of course we have to improve the infrastructure for schools, and plan to improve infrastructure of Anganwadis as well. So Anganwadis, there is need to improve the pre-primary education. So that's where the Anganwadis comes in, and this has to be significantly improved. So now coming to the URDPFI guidelines on educational facilities, this we have discussed in our previous lecture. These are standards, and these are just, these are not standards, but these are guidelines, and that means that they cannot be uniformly applied everywhere. So of course they has to be modified as per the local context, existing issues of that area, and the needs and the technology that that goes into that particular that would be adopted. All this determines how many of schools, what kind of schools, what area has to be provided for them. So roughly you can see that the standards covers pre-primary schools or nursery schools, primary schools class 1 to 5, senior secondary schools from class 6 to 12, integrated schools from class 1 to 12, integrated schools with hostel facilities, schools for physically challenged, mentally challenged, and so on. So in addition, colleges, university campus, technical education centers, and engineering colleges, medical colleges, other professional colleges, these also has been specified. So in some cases you see the schools are only building, the area requirement for buildings that has to be given is given. In other case, the playfield requirement also is specified. So schools should have their own playfield. So if they don't have a playfield, it can share playfields from surrounding areas also. So that is possible. But in general, schools, we have to determine how many schools should be provided for a certain area based on maybe how many, the population figures that are given over here. It says that for every 5,000 people, there has to be a primary school with a capacity of 500 students, or for every 7,500 people, there has to be a senior secondary school of capacity of 1,000 students. So this is how we can determine how many schools are required or how many colleges are required for an urban area. So this is just a guideline. This has to be modified as per the context. And in the next case study, this is case study from Newtown, Kolkata. We will see how schools have been allocated, or how many schools have been set up in this particular city. So Newtown is a new development in adjacent to Kolkata. You can call it a satellite township. So this is designed to house primarily the population which will which will work in the IT companies in the nearby areas and so on. But at the same point of time, it is an extension area for Kolkata. And when we are determining educational facilities for Newtown, two things has to be considered. Not all facilities are public facilities. Some are private facilities also. So their public facilities has to be given as per the social commitment. That means for every society, for right to education, we have to provide certain number of schools, certain number of training centers, and so on. Whereas for private facilities are set up based on commercial viability. That means a company can determine that they can make profit by opening up a school, and based on this commercial viability, private facilities are opened up. And of course, private facilities, because people pay for this particular facilities, they can also avail better services compared to public facilities. But at the same point of time, public facilities also can be equally good based on the government effort to provide good facilities or good schools with proper infrastructure in an urban area. But primarily, there is social commitment from the government to provide schools, but at the same point of time, in an urban area like Newtown, we cannot say that all schools should be made from the government, because a significant amount of people would be studying in private facilities. So we have to find a balance between how many private facilities and how many public facilities should be provided. So first of all, we have to determine the demand and supply of spaces of educational facilities in similar areas. So what the planners from Newtown found out was that many higher educational, vocational and training institutes hire spaces in commercial buildings. That means they don't have their own building or own land area where separate institutes are being created, but they hire spaces in other commercial buildings. Then tutorial centers like for engineering, medical, management, marketing, these are spread out throughout the urban area at different places. There is no specific zone or there is no specific plot of land which is allocated for this. Reservation of land but in case of large universities and colleges, there has to be reservation of land, because otherwise there is a large chunk of land is not available. So there has to be creation of larger plots of land where this kind of colleges or universities could be set up. Skill-oriented training units needs to be set up near industrial and commercial land use. Then the other thing that has to be considered is, should every neighborhood should have a school, or we can say that based on the ability of people to travel from one zone to another, based on availability of public transport, people may travel a larger distance to go to the schools and all. So is proximity within neighborhood a criteria for locating schools? Of course, schools has to be in proximity, but does it needs to be within the neighborhood, particularly in case of private facilities and all? Non-formal education facilities for marginalized people, this also needs to be provided. So these were the considerations that the planners went through while determining what sort of educational facilities has to be provided for this new township, which is Newtown in Kolkata. So the Newtown in Kolkata was set up, was developed by a state government company, which is West Bengal Housing Infrastructure Development Corporation. It was developed in 3 phases: Action Area 1, Action Area 2 and Action Area 3. The current case study is on Action Area 1. It has 660 hectares of land under Action Area 1, and the total planned population for this area is around 2.5 lakhs. So these are the number of educational facilities that were provided in Newtown. Nursery schools were provided, some were with detached plots, some were attached to primary schools, some were attached to high schools. So total land area allocated was for each unit was around 500 square meter, and overall total 30 of these primary schools were provided. Then primary schools with again were in a detached plot or it was attached to a high school. Detached plot primary schools either had has a play field with it or without field. So with field the size allocated was 2500 square meter, whereas without field size allocated for the plot for this kind of schools was 1500 square meters. Total 7 of these schools with fields were created and 3 without fields were created. Higher secondary schools with field, the size given was around 8000 square meters, whereas without field was 5000 square meters. Again, you can see the numbers as well. Along with that, residential school area was reserved, college area was reserved 20,000 square meters, and research center area was reserved for 20,000 square meters. Now, some key principles were followed. Some of the primary and senior secondary schools was thought to be operated under double shifts. So, of course, that will reduce the area requirement, or it will reduce the overall number of school requirement because the same school can operate in 2 shifts. Then some of the community play areas were grouped with the schools. So, in that case the schools didn't require any field. It can utilize the your nearby community areas, as you can see over here. This school plots can utilize the community areas over here or here and so on. Now, of course, there has to be certain rules and regulations in regards to usage of this particular fields by the school children, and because the people living in the surrounding area, they may protest. So, there some rules has to also be formulated for that. For higher educational demand, for plots which cater to higher education, bulk plots were reserved with 1% of the total land area was reserved for this. A separate educational and institutional zone was created. Training Vocational Continuing Education Institute was considered to be in certain other plots. So, floor area spaces were reserved for that. And in overall space for isolated in case of our isolated school plots, the size given was for nursery school was around 0.05 hectares. For primary school it was 0.2 to 0.3 hectares which had got field. If it didn't have a field, it was 0.12 hectares to 0.15 hectares. For higher secondary school it was 0.8 to 1 hectares and 0.4 to 0.5 hectares where they utilize the community play area. The other major problem while designing schools in an urban area is the parking or the peak hour traffic when schools are commence or when the school ends. There is huge amount of traffic jams, congestion that happens near the schools. For that, extra area was also provided for higher secondary schools and primary schools. A total length of 50 meter and depth of 5 meter in those particular plots were reserved. Total area of 250 square meters was reserved. For nursery schools, colleges and residential schools, 40 meter length and 3 meter depth was reserved, leading to 120 square meters, extra square meters just for parking and traffic management. And for other facilities, similar other areas were also reserved. Overall, if we compare this standards or the areas that were reserved in Newtown with the TCPO norms and the previous URDPFI guidelines, not the current guidelines, the previous one. So, here you can see that for nursery schools, the previous guideline was 1 for 2500 population. Right now, the guideline states around 1 per 2500 persons. For 2500 people, we have 1 primary school. And for primary school it is 5,000, for pre-primary it is 2,500, for senior secondary it is 7,500. So, over here you can see that for primary school it was instead of 5,000 it was considered 1 for 4,000. This is the previous URDPFI guideline, whereas in Newtown it was 1 for 7,400. So, maybe this is because double shifts are being considered. So, we can straight away almost double the population that we are considering. Similarly, 50% of schools were given isolated plots, and where 50% were attached with high schools. Now, within the 50% with isolated plots, 35% were given the road field and 15% have community field attached with them. Similarly, for other residential schools and all, the URDP5 guidelines say 1 for 1 lakh population, whereas for Newtown, it was adopted 1 for 1.5 lakh population. Also, the areas reserved are much less because Newtown is a costly area. Every plot of land costs a lot of money. So, even though these standards are given like this, the actual area adopted was lesser in Newtown. The reason given was the land is very costly over here, and probably the higher FAR was given so that we can go for vertical development, vertical growth instead of horizontal growth. So, these are the reasons why this is how the school facilities have been provided in Newtown area. Now, coming to the government programs which look into the different aspects of education in urban areas. One of the flagship program is to attain universal elementary education in the country. This is where free and compulsory, this is also known as the Sarva Shiksha Abhijan, or now also Samagra Shiksha Abhijan. So, here free and compulsory education is given to children between ages 6 to 14 years. So, this is nothing is charged. The ULB's role in implementing this program is to provide, municipal governments should provide the building in the neighborhood where this kind of schools could be conducted. Survey, monitoring and reporting of people engaged in the schools or teachers in the schools and what kind of education is being provided. NGOs and education departments can collaborate to provide this kind of education. Coordination and convergence between the different government departments, local bodies, civil society organizations and private sectors to provide universal elementary education. Then preparation of the overall plans for implementing these programs, and finally funding has to come from the state government. So, in Kolkata Municipal Corporation runs several primary schools so that we can provide educations to kids with 6 to 14 years age group. Some schools are Bengali medium with and some schools are Hindi medium schools and some schools are Urdu medium. Some schools are even mixed with Bengali and Urdu and also Hindi and Urdu. So, these are the number of schools under each category, and you can see the number of students engaged and the number of teachers engaged. And here primary education is provided to the poor children. So, you can say this is a social commitment, and this is undertaken by the ULB. The ULB itself, Kolkata Municipal Corporation, is the ULB which is running these primary schools and funded by the state government. So, all kind of children can avail this kind of schools irrespective of their caste, religion or community. So, in addition to education, there are other programs also which are carried on, different activities, trainings and so on. National textbooks are given free of cost, medical and health checkups, free medicines are provided. So, if you remember from the health services, we said that schools also act as health centers. Then free midday meal, 3 kg of rice per child per month. So, provision of nutrition also via schools, this is also being attained. So, in addition, the government runs other programs in regards to education. The one is National Digital Literacy Mission. So, here the aim is to digitally educate at least one member of the family. Now, this means IT training to individuals, Anganwadi and Asha workers and ration shop dealers, so that people can use the IT systems for both for data entry as well as for looking into analyzing the data. So, this will help people to improve their participation in e-governance. They will educate the people. Then this will help in strengthening livelihood and business activities. The curriculum needs to be designed in such a way so that people can think critically, to educate women on secondary skills and technical skills, and finally towards a better socio-economic ecosystem. So, more or less, this is nowadays we are getting IT systems in every parts of life. Many transactions happen online. Many kind of buying and selling happens online. So, people have to be digitally literate. So, these programs actually tries to is geared towards making people more digitally literate, and particularly Anganwadi Asha workers, ration shop dealers, if they are digitally literate, they can conduct their operations in a more in a way so that data can be recorded real time or they could be utilized real time. Then along with that, we have the National Skill Development Program. We have discussed this earlier. So this is run by the National Skill Development Corporation along with the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So one case study in Delhi, for example, 75,000 people in age group of 18 to 45 years are being targeted. So this entire program is financed by New Delhi Municipal Council and Sankalp through a World Bank project under this Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So our recognition of prior learning RPL is conducted through camps, through conduct of particular camps, and particularly at employers' premises. These are conducted so that these people are trained in the employer and eventually they get a job with those particular employers. Job sectors are like construction, electrical and plumbing. And finally, trainees are also given accidental insurance for 2 years. So this kind of training programs are part of the national skill building programs, and these are also provide vocational training to the people in the urban areas. Finally, we come down to the national education policy. This is a recent introduction by the government based on SDG 4, which talks about inclusive, equitable, quality education and lifelong learning opportunities. Government to achieve this particular goal, the government has to revamp the entire educational system, and accordingly, government has come up with the national education policy in the year 2020. And the idea is to make sure that people can not only learn but also know how to learn, so that they can continue learning even after the education, after their formal education. So the focus is on less of content that has to be covered, but more on critical thinking and problem solving. What has to be, thought of, how people can think and can innovate. Then the training has to be multidisciplinary, experimental. The learnings has to be experimental. It has to be holistic, integrated, inquiry-driven, discovery-oriented, learner-centric, discussion-based, flexible, and also enjoyable. The curriculum covers basic arts, crafts, humanities, games, sports and fitness, languages, literature, culture, values, in addition to science and mathematics. So that means it's a overall education. The education system should focus on overall growth of an individual, and at the same point of time, it should be multidisciplinary. It should be driven so that people learn how to think critically, or they can innovate. And overall, the system should be enjoyable. Now, to do this, there has to be very much importance given to the pre-primary, because that is when every children, the mental growth happens during this initial years. So huge stress has to be given to the pre-primary education. So the structure, the pedagogical and that curricular structure has to be changed or revamped totally. So earlier the structure was, we have got nursery, then we have got primary, and then we have got higher, primary is till class 10, and then there is 10 plus 2, which is the higher secondary. But now the system is proposed is where we have 5 years of foundational courses, 3 years in Anganwadi and 2 years in schools. Then preparatory courses from class 3 to 5, middle school from class 6 to 8, and secondary schools from class 9 to 12. So this will change the overall structure in which we provide our education, or in which our schools are organized. So that means the entire system of provision of infrastructure or facilities, such as for primary schools or secondary schools, this has to be revamped. So we were in a certain system. Accordingly, we have URDPFI guidelines and so on. But now the system is now changed. So this will require total relook into what kind of infrastructure or facilities has to be provided in urban areas, and accordingly we have to redesign the entire guidelines for provision of this kind of facilities. So, as we have discussed, this new pedagogical structure looks into strengthening early childhood care and education. So, this is known as ECCE from age 3. So, there could be standalone Anganwadis, there could be Anganwadis co-located with primary schools, because we are now combining Anganwadi with primary schools. Pre-primary schools or section co-located with existing primary schools. This is pre-primary, which can be located with, this could be also located with existing primary schools, and also there could be standalone preschools as well. So, this is where a lot of change has to come, and we have to create facilities or reserve facilities when we plan for an urban areas for this kind of new infrastructure that is required to implement the new educational policy. So, in addition to the standard education system, we also have National Mission for Foundational Literacy and Numeracy. So, that will continue. Overall, we need to reduce dropouts by providing effective and sufficient infrastructure at all pre-primary to grade 12 schools. So, that means we have to really revamp our infrastructure, so people are happy to go to schools and they really enjoy learning, and their dropout rates reduce. Of course, there are other social issues which also affect which results in dropouts. Those also needs to be looked into as well. The government schools needs to be improved. There has to be upgrading and enlarging of schools. Additional quality schools needs to be provided in deprived areas, and safe and practical conveniences or transport to the schools also needs to be introduced. Vocational educational courses, programs and adult literacy and life enrichment programs also needs to be conducted. For that, state institutes of open schooling also needs to be opened up. So, these are certain changes which the national educational policy has brought in. Accordingly, we have to really look into setting up new infrastructure and facilities in urban areas. These are some of the references you can study. To conclude, there is need to update the guidelines for educational facilities as well as their area requirements considering the new educational policy. A fine balance between private and public facilities is required to provide quality education to all population groups. Thank you.